Welcome back. In our first video together, we considered how the various lenses through which we use to view history can affect what it is that we see. Both what we choose to look at and how we understand it are greatly affected by the lenses through which we view history. Now, in our second video together, we're going to consider humans by comparing ourselves to several different members of the animal kingdom, and in so doing, try to better understand ourselves and our unique way of being in the world. We'll look at the impact of a monumental dietary change and how it forever altered our evolutionary path, how it shaped us into the people we are today, the all-time, uncontested, all-species champions of beer pong. This is Brewing History. Episode 2. Stapled Stomachs. Let's begin by considering the koala. What does this adorable creature eat? The answer is quite straightforward, because it's really only one thing. Plant leaves, mostly eucalyptus leaves. For a koala, the answer to the question of what to eat is quite obvious. By contrast, deciding what to eat is not always a simple problem to solve for very social, omnivorous animals like us. But for the asocial, monophagous koala, deciding what to eat is never a problem. At least so long as there are some eucalyptus leaves available, koalas are forever spared our human problem of figuring out what to eat. But if you've ever found yourself to be a part of a group of social, omnivorous humans who seem utterly unable to decide what to get for dinner, to the point where it seems like the group may actually starve before making the decision, then you can see the advantage of the eucalyptus-focused diet for the koala. What do you want to grab for dinner? I was thinking eucalyptus. Me too. Breakfast? Eucalyptus. Lunch? Eucalyptus. Snack? Eucalyptus. Second breakfast? Eucalyptus. Of course, the very notion of meals like these have little significance for most herbivores, neither ruminants, like the cow, or hindgut fermenters, like the koala. These creatures are more or less obliged to spend most of their waking hours eating, grazing on plants essentially non-stop while active, and then resting or sleeping to conserve energy while digesting. Cows spend about half their day either resting or asleep, and koalas spend most of their day sleeping. For humans who sleep far less and tend to prefer to eat something in the range of 2 to 4 meals over the course of our day, the question of what to eat and when to eat it can become a real challenge. Every day, even defining the problem can be a challenge for us. We ask questions that would never occur to a koala, like, what am I specifically trying to achieve with this meal? What are my dining goals? Am I trying to simply satiate my hunger in the quickest and most efficient way possible, or are there certain flavors that I am trying to experience or avoid experiencing? Am I trying to curate an unforgettable luncheon? Is my diet driven by moral considerations? Perhaps I am choosing to eat local foods, for example, on the basis of environmental sustainability. Or perhaps I am choosing to eat local on account of nationalistic sentiments, say, during a trade war with my closest neighbor. Are there certain foods that are culturally encouraged to me or forbidden? Or am I trying to follow a certain dining tradition? Maybe I am choosing my foods based primarily on health goals or budgetary concerns. I may be making my meal choices because I'm trying to achieve a particular social goal or with someone else in mind. Many of the meals that I choose to prepare and eat on a daily basis are selected based upon what I think my family would enjoy eating. So perhaps we are making choices about what we should eat based on what we think other people would like to eat. Maybe we are preparing food specifically to meet the expectations for a certain holiday or feast day. Or, as is the case with so many of our meals, does our choice of what to eat lie at the intersection of all of these concerns, and maybe several more? We haven't even mentioned food allergies or sensitivities. All of this is to say that deciding what, when, how, and why we will eat can all be complicated choices. Unlike the koala, eating eucalyptus leaves whenever it gets hungry, eating for us is not just an automatic response to hunger. We might choose to eat when we're not hungry, and choose to not eat when we are. When eating, it is not just about maximizing our health while minimizing the impact to our budget, though that is usually quite complex enough in itself. It's also often an important emotional or social experience. Eating often has a strong emotional aspect, even when eating alone, but sharing meals can be extremely important to our emotionality, our socialization, and our happiness and resilience, to the degree that whether we eat alone or share our meal times with others can be a powerful predictor of our mental health. As a personal example, when I prepare my son's lunches for school, I'm not just trying to pack a balanced, healthy, and affordable meal that they will actually enjoy eating, with attractive and wholesome snacks on the side. I'm also packing up my love and my hopes for them on their day out in the world. I'm trying to teach them about food and nutrition as well, and I'm also trying to give them something special to look forward to. When I can pack them a nice lunch that I feel achieves all of these goals, I have a sense of accomplishment. I feel capable as a father. And when I can't, I feel like I have failed. I can feel defeated, guilty, even depressed over sandwiches. Meals for us are rarely just meals, and for this reason, for humans, a meal can represent a complex, stressful problem to be solved. Consider Thanksgiving, where flowcharts, seating arrangements, and mental breakdowns are not entirely uncalled for. Generating possible, ongoing solutions to this not uncomplicated daily problem of what to eat, and then picking between those options, evaluating their strengths and weaknesses, making a plan. All of this takes considerably more mental effort than simply continuing to eat more eucalyptus. It's why you may have just gone hungry after a long and draining day at work, because you simply could not rally the strength to even consider the problem of what to eat. Or perhaps you opted to eat 30 to 40 olives. Luckily, assuming we are not utterly exhausted, unlike the koala, we do have the mental capacity to handle these kind of mealtime problem-solving demands. And our diets, the diverse food choices of humans, as compared to those of koalas, are not unrelated to our respective problem-solving abilities, our respective intelligence and mental capacities. In The Primal Feast, Food, Sex, Foraging, and Love by Susan Allport, she writes that it is fashionable, these days not to compare intelligence in animals, to take the point of view that each animal has the brain it needs to survive in the environment in which it lives. But this point of view belies the importance of diet in shaping intelligence, and belies consideration of those turning moments in evolution when a change in diet might have precipitated a surge in cerebral complexity, or a decline in cerebral complexity, as the case may be. In an article in Natural History, University of Idaho zoologist John A. Byers described his first look at a koala brain, seen during a sabbatical year in Australia. As the veterinarian lifted off the top of the koala skull, I was amazed to see that the brain did not fill the space inside. The smooth cerebral hemispheres, each about as large and thick as the peel of a quarter of an orange, were so small that they did not meet at the midline. At one point in the species' evolution, Byers explains, the koala brain undoubtedly filled its skull, and the current mismatch suggests that the reduction in brain size was rapid. But why did it happen? The answer most probably has to do with diet. Koalas eat little other than nutrient-poor eucalyptus leaves, and they have the low metabolic rate and sloth-like habits appropriate for animals with a leaf-eating lifestyle. Very few fossil koalas exist, and next to nothing is known about how these creatures came to be strict leaf eaters. But biologists agree that their ancestors must have had a more diverse diet. Reduction of the brain, a metabolically expensive organ to maintain, may have been part of the koala's adaptation to a low-energy diet. So, koalas could not help us decide what to eat, unfortunately. They are foundationally incapable of understanding the problem. But if they could, they would probably just suggest we eat eucalyptus leaves, maybe suggesting leaves from one of their favorite varieties. The red river gum, Eucalyptus camaldulensis perhaps, which reportedly is a treasured varietal among koala gourmands. But the koala has adapted its brain, its whole body, its digestion and metabolism, its entire way of life, to this favorite food, to eucalyptus. And so they are now able to survive on such a narrow and toxic diet. We simply can't. If we were to try to join the koala in its meal of eucalyptus leaves, it would be toxic to us, and we would extract vanishingly little nutritive content from the leaves, as they likely irritated us all the way down through and out of our digestive systems. But this doesn't stop some people from trying, as evidenced by eucalyptus leaves being available as a herb to purchase online. Humans are particularly fond of consuming things that were evolved specifically to not be consumed, like caffeine and insecticide evolved to help prevent the fruit and leaves of plants like coffee and tea from being eaten by insects. Or capsaicin, which provides an irritating burn to discourage our consumption of it, but which some of us love so much we've bred chilies to produce outrageous amounts of it. In some cases, these plant chemical defenses, this biological warfare, is both delicious to us and may provide health benefits as well. Consider resveratrol, which is found in the skins of grapes of all colors and is created by the plant in order to help fight infections and fungal growth. When consumed by humans, resveratrol has been associated with several health benefits. And this is the major reason for the health halo afforded to red wine. Might eucalyptus also be good for us to eat? Could an argument be made for eucalyptus tea, similar to those made for red wine or black coffee? Could we share in the koala's meal of eucalyptus after all? Eucalyptol, the active ingredient in eucalyptus, is like caffeine in that it is an insecticide, evolved to help protect the plant. Its scent can act as an insect repellent, but many people consider eucalyptol to be of potential use beyond this application and consider consuming it to be medicinally beneficial. Eucalyptus oil can be found as an ingredient in lozenges and cough drops like these ones from Germany. And if you consume them, you may find that they can help provide relief from your cough and cold symptoms, your sore throat. In any case, you're quite unlikely to experience any problems from consuming eucalyptus oil in this way, just as you are quite unlikely to experience any serious problems from consuming a cup of coffee. And this brings us to an important point about foods. Toxicity is perhaps best understood as less a matter of type and more a matter of dosage. We are mostly water, and it's hard to think of something less toxic for us to consume, but if you drink enough water quickly enough, you will reach the level of water intoxication. It's quite rare, but it can be quite serious. Deaths have occurred from consuming too much water, such as in water drinking contests where the organizers and the participants had no idea that drinking good, clean water could possibly carry such lethal risks. Under normal circumstances, of course, drinking water is quite harmless, quite necessary, just as drinking coffee or tea is quite safe for most healthy adults under normal circumstances. But a high enough dose of caffeine, delivered quickly enough, like one delivered from highly caffeinated energy drinks, supplements, or powders, can be quite dangerous. Eucalyptus oil, like highly concentrated caffeine powder, is far more dangerous than consuming either eucalyptus leaves or tea leaves as they come from the plant, especially to children. It's fairly rare in adults, but it's not entirely uncommon to see eucalyptus oil poisoning in very young children. The Royal Children's Hospital, Melbourne, reminding us that eucalyptus oil is highly toxic, and even small ingestions of pure oil can lead to severe symptoms. So, while most physicians and most foodies wouldn't likely recommend it, we could technically share the koala's meal of eucalyptus. We could eat it. But we wouldn't share the koala's tolerance for eucalyptol, and far more importantly, we wouldn't share the koala's body, its guts, metabolism, or brain. I suspect that long before the eucalyptus oil found in its leaves could build up enough to kill us, a diet of exclusively eucalyptus leaves would have already ended our lives, quite unpleasantly, through starvation. Yes, we have a particular habit of consuming and enjoying toxic substances, like ethanol. But in terms of dietary strategy, we are essentially the opposite of the koala. We don't focus on eating one niche food source, made even more niche by being toxic and inedible to most other creatures, but rather, we try to take advantage of every possible food source that we might have access to, wherever we are in the world. Expanding our focus beyond Australia and looking towards the rest of the world, let's now consider the rat. Starting with the question, what do rats eat? Anything they can. What's available? In this way, in our diets, we are much more like rats than we are like koalas. And the similarities don't stop there. If we look at the global distribution of rats, we'll see another similarity. Rats and humans have covered almost every part of the globe. One of the few places we cannot inhabit is Alberta. I am, of course, joking, Albertans. I love you. While this map is surprising to many, if you are joining us from Alberta, you will not be surprised to see this map. Canadians from the Wild Rose country are well aware of the strict anti-rat policy present in their province. Rats cannot be kept as pets or chefs in Alberta, and the province will employ special teams to hunt down and destroy any rats that are sighted. Why is Alberta so anti-rat? There are lots of good reasons. Rats can damage homes and infrastructure, spread pathogens and parasites, but consider what foods Alberta grows, what foods Alberta is known for. If you're not Canadian, then I'll let you know that it is the cereals, the grasses that grow in abundance, and the ruminants that eat them. Alberta is famed for the quality of its grain, its wheat and barley, its beer and rye, and its beef. So it is a province I have very much enjoyed visiting. And it is a province that has taken exceptional steps to protect their grain and feed. We will discuss more about the ancient importance of rodent pest control to grain-based societies when we discuss the storing of grains, the rise of civilizations, and the domestication of cats. For now, we'll move on from this map, but note that despite rats being unable to survive in the wild in some parts of the world, rats have still been found in these places, even in the Arctic and other very cold and inhospitable regions. Rats were only able to arrive and survive there in concert with humans. This rat distribution map has been created, of course, by humans, like the entirety of the map of the modern world. Rats have traveled with humans as we have moved around the globe, and still stow away on trips and shipments to unpopulated areas like Alberta. And rats, like humans, have been successful, sometimes devastatingly so, in the environments that we have introduced them to, because they are such opportunistic omnivores, like us. Most of the world's eucalyptus is found in Australia, limiting even the most ambitious koalas' travel plans. But for rats, for us, when it comes to what's on the menu, we'll both have one of everything, please. The word omnivore derives from the Latin omnis, meaning all, and vora, or vorere, which means to eat or devour, making omnivore a pretty metal word. We have been aided in our appetites by our big, beefy brains, metabolically expensive to run, far too costly to fuel on eucalyptus, but if applied properly, can more than pay for itself in the application of finding, preparing, enhancing, and consuming new and rather novel food sources. Consider whaling, and consider it for a moment from the perspective of the whale. Imagine that you are a magnificent blue whale. It's not to scale. You're much larger than this. You are perhaps the largest creature that has ever existed anywhere in the universe. Certainly here on Earth, where you make the vast oceans your home, you are unmatched in scale, larger than any dinosaur that ever existed, and capable of expanding to almost twice your normal size as you engulf vast amounts of water to filter feed on much, much smaller creatures. Your existence as a megafauna is relatively comfortable and peaceful by the standards of the animal kingdom, until a group of omnivorous murder apes, far from their natural habitat where they evolved, voyaged to the middle of the Antarctic on a vessel crafted from felled trees and lashed together, and not only can these pitiless primates manage to bring you with all your size and speed to your untimely end, but they are so successful at this most unexpected form of predation that they also manage to hunt your entire species to the very edge of extinction. Imagine the shock of the whale. I think it would feel something like myself being hunted by a crew of bloodthirsty little sardines, running me down on dry land, driving a little tin tank, shooting harpoons, or it's difficult to imagine. Sardines, while omnivores, should have no business hunting me. Likewise, humans have no natural business preying on marine megafauna like whales in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. At least not from an evolutionary perspective. Our diets and predatory abilities initially did not include anything of the sort. Yet, as humans, we have had a very long history of megafauna predation. Looking at most children's books on animals, we tend to see a focus on African megafauna, elephants and giraffes, and more than one child has wondered, why is it mostly Africa where we see these exciting large animals? What happened to them everywhere else? It has been suggested that the surviving megafauna of the African continent is perhaps owing to the fact that these species had an opportunity to evolve alongside humans and learn to fear and survive our predation. Where humans arrived as unknown and unassuming little creatures, about as threatening as a sardine, now extinct megafauna presumably had little reason to fear us, to their detriment. Although there is some debate as to how much human predation contributed to the historic extinctions of megafauna, some will point to other pressures that also likely played a role. The extinction of megafauna does tend to be strongly correlated with human arrival, even if other pressures are present as well. Megafauna was once found on every continent of this world, and now humans are. Here in North America, there once were beavers the size of black bears, but they survive now only in the stories and legends of First Nations people like those of the Anishinaabe. These creatures are thought to have been hunted to extinction long ago by the earliest North Americans whom, it has been suggested, first arrived in this continent precisely because they were in pursuit of such prey, following the migrations of herds of now extinct Pleistocene megafauna, large animals like the Castoroides, which made attractive targets. Humans are unique in many ways, but one terrifying way, at least from the perspective of everything else on the planet, is how we have become an unassuming and unexpected killing machine. We appear meek and unintimidating, but are in reality an utterly unprecedented global super predator who will prey upon a large variety of both terrestrial and marine animals. We are now the apex predator, but like sardines, a rather unlikely one. Once prey, still skittish and riddled with anxiety, but now utterly unmatched and indisputably at the top. So much so that we can drive entire species to extinction without even preying upon them. We do it without trying, by accident. We do it indirectly and indiscriminately, so that we have become more than just another species. We are an ongoing mass extinction event, the Anthropocene extinction. In alien attack movies, where much suspension of disbelief is required, I always found stories that ended with humans gaining the upper hand through some measure of creative violence to be utterly believable. If aliens did arrive on our planet, then they very well may be shocked and taken by surprise by our human capacity to kill in novel, efficient, and even accidental ways, all owing to and fueling our big brains. Let's now return to modern-day Alberta and consider another incredible creature, the cow. What do cows eat? The answer, of course, is grass. How do they achieve this feat? Why don't we ruminate on it? They are ruminants. The answer, of course, is that cows are a type of creature known as a ruminant, named after their rumens, specialized digestive structures that allow them to effectively break down and metabolize their relatively nutritionally poor diet of plant cellulose. Vertebrates like cows, koalas, and ourselves mostly lack the ability to metabolize plant cellulose due to the lack of cellulase enzymes. To get over this critical issue, ruminants haven't actually developed the ability to create these critical enzymes themselves. Rather, they are completely dependent upon mixed cultures of microorganisms to break down cellulose for them. Digestion in rumens is primarily carried out by the microbiological flora inside. Rumens contain dense populations of several species of bacteria, protozoa, yeast, and other fungi. 1 milliliter of rumen juice is estimated to contain billions of bacteria, millions of protozoa, and thousands of yeast and fungi. Like the koala, cows have chosen an evolutionary strategy that relies on extracting the maximum possible nutritional value from an underwhelming food source, leaves of grass, and other plant material. So, necessarily, like the koala, the cow is not a very large-brained creature. To make an analogy, if life were a role-playing game, then cows have put almost all of their available points into digestion, with very little left to invest in intelligence. Are we like cows? Certainly when it comes to brain power, no, we are not. In fact, as a species, we have essentially the opposite strategy. We have put all of our points into intelligence, and we have left ourselves with almost nothing for our guts. Our digestive systems are small and underwhelming and notoriously poor at extracting nutrients from non-pre-processed foods. Many of our digestive tracts can be upset by something as simple as eating too much ice cream. When compared to a cow, our guts are seriously uninspiring. So, can we eat grass? Well, what do you mean? If we consider the question from a pedantic perspective, then the answer is yes, we can eat it. You can go outside and eat some grass, though you should probably touch some first. It is possible for us to do this, just as we are capable of eating eucalyptus leaves. But is it possible for us to survive on a diet of grass or eucalyptus leaves? The answer to this question is clearly no. Yet we know that humans have built whole societies on diets based upon certain grasses. Rice, wheat, corn, specifically the seeds, the fruit of these delicious grasses. And these grains are far from inedible to us, but when taken together have provided much of the caloric foundation to build and maintain modern civilization itself. But even when considering just the seeds of grasses, not the leaves or other parts of the plant, if we were to ask a more narrow question, can humans survive on a diet of grass seeds? We have to ask again, what do you mean if we were forced to eat these foods as other animals do, truly raw and in their natural state, unmodified by cooking, cultivation? Then we would ruin our teeth as we slowly starve to death. Give me a full bag of raw wheat, but allow me to do nothing other than eat the tough, hard little kernels just as they came from the plant, and I am done for. Without cooking, there is food everywhere, but not a morsel to eat. Imagine for a moment that you were lost and alone, deep in the wilderness, and all you had was the clothes on your back and that bag of raw wheat. What might you do? When I've asked students this question in the past, many say they would try to soak the kernels in a little water in order to soften the grain up, make it easier to chew and digest. This seems like something that would have been tried by our ancient ancestors as well, or perhaps discovered by accident while foraging, coming across some grain which had been soaked on the ground, and discovering that this soaked grain is much easier on the teeth. Now let's say you have mostly mastered preparing your grain by pre-soaking it, but you let some grain go a little bit too far, and now it's begun to sprout. Being hungry, you will of course still eat this sprouted grain, and you will now discover, to your delight, that not only is the grain softer, it is also tastier too, with a hint of sweetness, owing to enzymes which have been made by the seed in order to break down the hard and densely packed starches which make up the bulk of the seed, prepared as energy stockpile to fuel the growth of a new plant, but which needs to be first broken down into readily digestible, highly consumable sugars that the plant can use to grow. You have effectively discovered what brewers call malting. And if you leave your sprouted grain soaking in water for even longer still, you may find that the mixture spontaneously ferments. And if you drink this, being still hungry, you will have discovered the basics of beer and bread. Refine and perfect this process, and you have transformed a marginal or outright inedible food source into something resembling a superfood, highly digestible, enriched from the fermentation process. Cooking, when considered in the broadest sense as a preparation or processing of food in various ways, unlocks new sources of food for us. Cooking enhances the food source to make it both more digestible and contain more nutritional value, a process that is sometimes called ennoblement. But it also can make it much more delicious, and also make it boozy. As they say, beer has food value, but food has no beer value. Cooking is key. It's the difference between starving and thriving, suffering or bonding with friends and family over some warm brewskis. So if we ask, are we like cows? Can we eat grass? In a more broad sense, then of course the answer is a resounding yes. We are extremely successful eaters of cereal grasses. We have cultivated and improved several grasses for their cereal grains and built entire societies upon them as a food source. Consider the question, can humans fly? Of course, in the strictest sense of our biological abilities, no, we cannot. But one way to think about human technology, like cooking, is as extending our natural abilities. No, humans cannot biologically fly, but we are the fastest and most powerful flyers that Earth has ever seen. If we allow for the use of our technology, then the fastest animal flyers don't even come close. A peregrine falcon, while diving, can reach speeds that are greater than any other non-human animal on Earth, but its top speed is still less than half of what is required to break the sound barrier. I have never personally gone faster than the speed of sound, but I have flown very successfully several times. Not to brag, but I have flown faster and further than many other creatures which are capable of flight. Our bodies may not be capable of flying when we are alone and naked in the wilderness, but our technologies, our societies, allow us flightless apes to soar. Our biological furnishings, beyond our brain, are all fairly underwhelming when compared to those of the animal kingdom. It's not just our guts. Our sight is fairly middling, but we have seen beyond our natural abilities into the UV spectrum. We can see flowers as bees do. And using lenses, we can both correct our vision as it fails and extend it to see as sharp as the eagle. We have utterly outdone all other animals in the realm of sight. Using electron microscopes, we have seen into the microcosmos, and using telescopes pointed into space, we have seen into the very past of our universe. Our technology, when considered as modulating and enhancing our natural abilities, makes us a truly impressive creature with utterly staggering capabilities. A creature that is capable of surviving underwater, up to incredible depths, or in outer space, and on every surface of our planet. An awesome creature that is easily capable of becoming a global super predator and causing an ongoing extinction event, wiping out entire species by accident. No, humans cannot do any of these things without technology. But if you answered the previous question, can humans fly, with a yes, then you've probably internalized the notion that technology expands our natural abilities. And in that line of thinking, we can understand a brewery as a kind of external rumen, a external stomach, a mechanical digester with mills for teeth and tanks for guts. Yes, humans can eat grasses. We do so very successfully, built our civilizations upon it, and we don't need the teeth and jaws of a cow to do it. We had stones, mortars, and now high-speed hammer mills. We don't need to maintain several stomachs. We've learnt to build artificial stomachs outside of our streamlined, efficient bodies. Our evolutionary strategy of putting all of our points into intelligence has proven incredibly successful. To be honest, overpowered and unbalanced, really. You would get kicked off the campaign for breaking the game, multi-classing in every class, having all proficiencies, and being the best at literally everything, with godlike powers. This strategy has allowed us to make up for the many shortcomings of the other aspects of our bodies by using our technologies developed with our big brains to either supplement or replace our physiological capabilities. We can move mountains, just not with our bare hands. We don't achieve the eating of grasses, the horror of hunting whales, the miracle of flight, or much of anything we do today by employing our bodies directly. We don't use our bodies so much as we use our tools, our technology, our minds. Our technology is fundamental to our success, and cooking, while often not thought of this way, is foundational to our technology. Brewing beer is very early and very successful biotech. Cooking in general is underconsidered, I think, when it comes to understanding history, but a happy exception is this book, Consider the Fork, A History of How We Cook and Eat. This book looks at the ways cooking science and technology evolved through time and shaped our own evolution. Long before forks and pots and pans, we were cooking. The author, B. Wilson, writes, geothermal springs can be found in Iceland, Japan, and New Zealand. They are sufficiently rare, however, that they still have the status of a natural wonder. In pre-industrial times, living near hot springs must have been like having a samovar the size of a lake in your backyard. an improbable luxury. The Maori of New Zealand, who live close to the boiling pools of Wakawewa, traditionally use them for cooking. Food of various kinds, root vegetables, meats, would be placed in flaxen bags and suspended in the water until cooked. A similar technique has been practiced in the geothermal regions of Iceland for hundreds of years. Today, in Iceland, a kind of dark rye bread is still made by placing the dough inside a tin and burying it in the hot earth near to the springs until it is fully steamed, which usually takes around 24 hours. Most people, however, do not live anywhere near geothermal springs. If you had only encountered cold water, what would it take for you to get the idea of heating it up to cook with? Water and fire are opposites, enemies even. If you had spent hours getting your fire going, the wood gathering, the flint rubbing, the piling up of sticks, why would you jeopardize it all by bringing water near your precious hearth? To us, with our easily reignitable burners and electric kettles, boiling is a very prosaic activity. We are accustomed to pots. But cooking in hot water would not have seemed the obvious next step to someone who had never done it. The first conscious acts of boiling took great invention. To make a vessel for cooking when there was none before is a feat of huge creativity. In geothermal cooking, although various bags and strings may be used, they're not essential. The earth itself containing the bubbling water becomes the cooking pot. In the absence of hot springs, however, boiling requires a container, one strong enough to withstand heat, and from which the food will not leak. In the days before clay pots, what could it be? No method was as ingenious as the technology of hot stone cookery, practiced across the globe starting at least 30,000 years ago. After thousands of years of direct fire roasting, people had finally figured out a more indirect way of using heat to cook things in steam or water. It has been said that this transformation in how food could be cooked was the greatest technological innovation in food preparation until modern times. This is how to make a pit oven. First, dig a large hole in the ground and line it with stones to make it roughly waterproof. Then you fill the pit with water. You could skip this stage if you dug the pit below the water table, in which case it would fill up automatically. In Ireland, there are thousands of traces of hot rock troughs cut into the watery peat bog. Next, take some more stones, preferably large river cobblestones, and heat them to a very high temperature in a fire. Cooking rocks were heated as hot as 932 degrees Fahrenheit or 500 degrees Celsius, hotter than a pizza oven. Transport the stones to the pit using tools such as wooden tongs to avoid burning your hands, and drop them in the water. When enough stones have been added, the water will start to seethe or boil, and food can be added, topped with an insulated lid of turf, leaves, animal skins, or earth. As the temperature of the water drops, continue to add more hot rocks to keep the boiling constant until the meal is cooked. Moving forward, the author also tells us that the other notable thing about pitstone cookery was that it made it possible to eat numerous wild plants that would otherwise have been more or less inedible. The types of foods traditionally cooked in the slow, moist heat of a pit oven tended to be bulbs and tuberous roots rich in inulin, a carbohydrate that cannot be digested by the human stomach. It is present in Jerusalem artichokes, hence their notorious flatulent effects. Hot stone cookery transformed these plants through hydrolysis, a process liberating the digestible fructose from the carbohydrate. In some cases, these plants need to be cooked for as long as 60 hours for the hydrolysis to occur. A pleasant side effect was that the long, moist cooking made unpromising wild bulbs taste fantastically sweet. Some people were so attached to earth ovens and pit boiling that they did not see pots as superior or even necessary. The Polynesians of the early Christian era, the people who traveled to the eastern Pacific Islands in the first millennium AD, arriving in Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island from Samoa and Tonga, present the fascinating spectacle of people who had known pots for 1,000 years, only to abandon them. From around 800 BC, Polynesians made a range of pottery, typically earthenware, fired at a low heat, tempered with shell or sand. Yet when they arrived at the Marquesa Islands around 100 AD, they abruptly gave up pottery making and chose to cook again without pots. It might have been different if they had been rice eaters, but the Polynesian diet was rich in starchy vegetables such as yams, taro, sweet potato, and breadfruit, all of which cooked better with hot stones than in pots. This method of cooking is ancient, but not gone. It still thrives in many cultural traditions around the world. Consider Mexican barbacoa, or traditional mezcal, where agave is steamed in earth ovens, the process lending the distinctive smoky character to the drink. There are also in-between transitional processes, which also still thrive today. Methods that are somewhere between ancient earth and stone cooking and modern pots and pans on a cooktop. In America, you may have seen someone burying a Dutch oven with hot coals to make cornbread, or slow-cooked casseroles, or a New England clam bake, steamed clams. Perhaps the best example, however, is cooking in a tandoor, which is effectively a constructed above-ground pit oven. The etymological origin of the word tandoor ultimately deriving from the words mud and fire. In brewing, we see hot stone cooking remaining very important up to the Middle Ages, when wooden brewing vessels, which obviously cannot be put over a fire directly, were much more commonplace than expensive metal heat-safe vessels. While this brewing process is rare today, it also survives into modernity, and some prominent examples include the German Steinbier, or stone beer style, as well as several traditional farmhouse brewing styles. Steinbier is still commercially made, but is generally in the realm of special one-offs or homebrewer passion projects. We can see an example of the process in these clips from The Beer Hunter, a hugely influential television program from the late 80s. In this episode, the host, Michael Jackson, visits a Steinbier brewery in Germany, the Rockenfels brewery in Bavaria. Here we see gray wax stones superheated in a beechwood fire and then introduced to a brew kettle, where they will contribute their heat to the boil and where they will become coated with caramelized and burnt sugars from the wort. The hot stones reach over 1,000 degrees Celsius, and as the super hot surface of these stones meet the sugars of the wort, those sugars are transformed. The process is thought to contribute caramel, toffee, and toasted or burnt sugar notes, potentially lending bitter, burnt, and smoky characteristics as well. Characteristics that some brewers may choose to enhance with blackened or smoked malt. The stones are retrieved after the boil and placed into the fermentation tanks, so the burnt sugars on the surface of the stones can contribute their color, flavor, and alcohol to the final beer. Many craft brewers in North America have tried their hand at stone brewing, inspired by the German Steinbier process, but stone brewing survives into the present day in other parts of the world too, notably in traditional Scandinavian, Nordic, and Baltic farmhouse brewing practices. In these clips, we see an example of a traditional stone brewing process being conducted in Latvia, using a wooden vessel as a kind of lauterton, a vessel normally used for filtering the liquid wort out from the solids of brewing. It is here that the hot stones are introduced, drawn from the fire, and coated with flour, or perhaps sugar, before being added to the wooden vessel containing the grain and hops in order to bring some color to the brew of unkilned farmhouse malts and to bring the mixture to a boil. In this process, the brew is boiled on the grain before the liquid wort is separated by being drained from the vessel and fermented into beer. Here in Canada, back in 2017, a commercial brewery in Kingston, Ontario came up with a unique twist on the Steinbier process by utilizing a cannonball instead of local stones. This cannonball had been dredged up from the bottom of Lake Ontario, 36 pounds of solid iron, believed to date back to the War of 1812. The Wolfe Island Spring Craft Brewery superheated this historic lump of metal and then introduced it to their wort in order to create their Cannonball Steinbier. The brewery no longer exists, so this unique beer is no longer being made, but last episode we introduced this series through a discussion of the War of 1812, and I'm very happy to have the connection and callback here. I hope I've convinced you that cooking, writ large, is a hugely important technology, foundational to our species' success. But cooking is itself built upon another technology, one that facilitates our cooking and makes it possible, along with pretty much everything else that we do. We use this technology throughout the brewing process as well as essentially everywhere else. My brother, Ryan North, wrote an excellent book called How to Invent Everything, a survival guide for the stranded time traveler, published in 2018. 4 years earlier, he was giving a TEDx talk that helped to inspire the book, A Time Traveler's Primer.
Here's my pitch on what you should use your time machine to invent. And I'll give you some hints. It wasn't on my chart. It's something you've used today. You probably used it before breakfast. And it's a technology so fundamental that you were exposed to it literally within seconds of being born.
Have you guessed what it is? Feel free to pause the video and think about it before my brother reveals the answer now.
It's language. And it is a technology. We tend to think of it being almost like mathematics, like it's some fundamental property of the universe that we're exploiting. But we totally made it up, and it's totally arbitrary.
This critical technology sets us apart from other animals that may prepare their foods in different ways that resemble cooking. Raccoons are also known as wash bears for their habit of rinsing their foods off in water before eating them. Clever birds are well documented in behaviors like dropping hard foods such as clams onto stones from great heights in order to make a meal of these armored creatures. And some birds may even have harnessed fire, as the National Post reports. The concept of fire-foraging birds is well established. Raptors on at least 4 continents have been observed for decades on the edge of big flames, waiting out scurrying rodents and reptiles, or picking through their barbecued remains. What's new, at least in the academic literature, is the idea that these birds might be intentionally spreading fires themselves. If true, the findings suggest that birds, like humans, have learnt to use fire as a tool and as a weapon. Birds have been implicated in the spreading of wildfires in Australia, but while these creatures may engage in behaviors and activities similar to what we do when preparing our foods, they lack cooking or a true cooking culture because they lack the technology of language. This is something important that sets us apart from the rats. Despite what you may have been led to believe, rats can't cook. Yes, they are opportunistic omnivores like us, but one reason why Alberta can stay rat-free, why humans can pretty much use the same types of rat poisons and traps year after year, is that rats largely lack the ability to learn. Not as individuals, who can absolutely learn to fear and avoid our traps and poisons, but as a species. Rats lack the ability to transmit the learnings and knowledge hard-won by individuals across the planet to the species as a whole, and forward through time. Rats also lack our human ability to vomit, which makes them fairly picky as far as opportunistic omnivores accustomed to eating our miscellaneous trash goes, but critically, what rats lack compared to humans is culture. Yes, rats and other animals have family groups, interpersonal interactions, social and group dynamics. They know who their friends are and who to avoid and who is calling the shots. But they don't have a sense of what their ancestors were like. They don't tell stories of their past in an oral tradition like Aboriginal stories of fire-spreading birds or huge beavers, nor do they publish academic papers considering the same subjects. Rats might communicate in basic ways, but they don't have the technology of language, neither written nor spoken. They can't share or transmit information and stories, as we are doing now, communicating across vast distances of space and time itself. I hope I am still alive, but if I have passed, then you are receiving messages from beyond the grave. Ooh! The way humans share knowledge, even before AI, provided us with a kind of externalized, shared brain, a technology that improves and magnifies our individual knowledge and memory substantially. It's not just our mechanical or physical abilities that our technologies enhance, it's our intellectual abilities as well. Technology is our magic, our ace up our sleeve, our world-breaking advantage. When we compare ourselves to other animals, which we like to do often, we usually try to find an explanation for why we are so obviously different, but there may not actually be that many things which truly set us apart. Which is surprising to us, as our outcomes, utterly dominating our planet, are so different to that of any other species on the planet, and as near as we can tell, to any other species that has ever existed. In the past, we've identified a couple of key attributes and behaviors that we thought were utterly unique to humans, but it is a list that keeps getting revised and shorter. We used to think that humans were the only creatures that use tools. Now we know that this is not the case, and that both octopuses and corvids are also quite unnerving in their capacity to use tools, just like us. So why are we so different? It may boil down to our unique capacity to think, and perhaps our unique capacity to drink. Much more on that in our next episode. If there were an all-species Olympics, humans would not have much of a chance of winning almost any event unless we made competitive drinking a sport. Again, when it comes to humans, we are nothing really special when it comes to physical traits like speed, though we like to think we're pretty fast stuff. Racing each other in water, like it's not even embarrassing for hairless apes to do this in front of the other animals. The fastest human swimmers ever, unaided by technology, could not even hope to outrace an average sardine, which can swim over 6 times faster than our best. It's a good thing they don't hunt us, though perhaps our disappointing performance in the water shouldn't surprise us as terrestrial animals. Still, even on dry land, we're not all that exceptional, and in fact, we're pretty underwhelming. Compared to cows, who are obliged to haul around their large digestive equipment with them everywhere they go, we are rather sluggish. And most people would struggle to keep up with a cow, which can typically run about 100 meters in just 12 seconds. Usain Bolt, at his very best, could probably beat an average cow. He set the human record for 100 meters in just under 10 seconds, but the average person could not outrace an average cow, let alone the Usain Bolt of cows, utterly unbeatable in a sprint. But if there were an all-species Olympics, there are a couple of areas in which we would dominate. And while we would lose the top spot and the second and third place in all the other racing events to a great many other creatures, there is one event in which we would likely destroy all the competition, cows included: marathon. To tell this story, we should start, as all good stories do, in a pub, specifically the Neuadd Arms Hotel, whose old stables are now home to the Heart of Wales Brewery, a traditional English real ale brewery, which was inaugurated with a pull from the casks by the now King of Canada in 2010. Before Prince Charles was king, before this brewery was inaugurated, and just before I was born, this pub was host to a significant bar argument. The Neuadd Arms Hotel was the scene of a debate, of the sort that many bars have housed, bars being prone to the types of arguments that the Guinness Book of World Records was originally published as a promotional item offered by the Guinness Brewing Company in order to help settle. Arguments like, what is the fastest game bird in Europe? Or, which has the higher airspeed velocity, African or European swallows? Or, what was the largest stone ever thrown into a lake, and what have you? This particular bet was concerning whether humans or horses were faster. And while horses would obviously win in the short run, the crux of this particular pub argument was focused on the distance of the race. According to local lore, the manager of the pub at the time, one Gordon Green, overheard this debate between two customers, and our publican was inspired to organize a race to settle their argument. This grew into an annual cross-country race, the Man versus Horse Marathon, where humans and horses raced. Well, humans raced horses who had to carry other humans on their backs, which seems unfair, as the humans didn't have to carry a horse. Or maybe a dog riding on their back would be more fair? In any case, Mr. Green apparently hoped that this novel race might be good for pub business, but he also wanted the chance to prove that a human could beat a horse. And they eventually did. In 1989, a cyclist beat the fastest horse for the first time ever. Bicycles were allowed until 1993, but only for the humans, which again seems unfair to the horses. But it wasn't until the 25th annual race in 2004 that a human on foot beat the fastest human on a horse. That year the conditions were hot and dry, and the win streak for the horses was broken. A human has only ever beaten the fastest horse 4 times in the 44-year history of this race, and every time the weather has been warm, hot, or sweltering. In this kind of weather, horses struggle. They sweat to cool down like we do, but they are covered in hair and overheat faster than us in hot, humid conditions. Or during times of exertion and stress, like carrying a man on your back through a marathon during a heat wave. Horses get dehydrated, suffer from heat stress and heat stroke just as we do, but hairless apes tend to do better than hairy horses in the heat. The most recent wins for humans were back-to-back in 2022 and 2023. And as our world gets warmer, it seems rather likely that humans are going to win this race more often. So I guess that's one advantage to climate change? We have a strategy called persistence hunting, where you don't need to be the fastest. You just need to be the most hairless and the sweatiest, aka the coolest, so you can be the last to overheat and to tire out. To outcompete any terrestrial megafauna that you care to eat or any horse that you want to race, you simply have to wait for them to get overheated and exhausted. In our evolutionary past, because we had mastered this hunting style, it didn't matter that our prey was almost always faster than us. We could simply wear them down and catch them eventually. Like a man racing a horse or racing a dirt bike, if the contest can be stretched, made to last long enough, if the challenge can be turned from a sprint into a marathon, then we will win. Eventually, all engines overheat, all tanks must run dry. We lose the race, but we win our meal. A mountain gazelle can reach speeds of 80 kilometers an hour, which would match a fast dirt bike. A gazelle is quick, but if we can track it, if we can pursue it, then the gazelle is doomed. When it eventually must stop, when it collapses from exhaustion and heat, the gazelle will see that those Terminator apes are still coming. We're just relentless. It's interesting to see this horror of ourselves reflected back at us in the documentary Terminator 2, which could have been called Persistence Hunter 2. Incidentally, running and drinking can potentially do remarkably similar things to our brains, whether you're trying to run down a horse in a marathon or arguing about racing a horse over a pint at the pub. Runner's high can be experienced by long-distance runners, and it tends to come with a higher pain threshold, similar to drinking alcohol. Running can also stimulate the release of dopamine, as in the ascending phase of the biphasic impact of alcohol consumption, where our blood alcohol levels are rising and we can feel a mild euphoria as the alcohol enhances the release of dopamine and serotonin. Afterwards, in phase 2, the descending phase, as alcohol levels peak and then start to decline, it has a depressing effect as it powers down or downregulates our brain's prefrontal cortex. And this downregulation is also achieved by marathon runners through overstressing their body, which finds that it must divert precious energy resources towards the immediate priorities of maintaining their running and away from the gas-guzzling brain. Running, like drinking, can feel great for us if we can avoid chafed nipples and hangovers. So not only are we great as a species at chasing other creatures down, we also kinda get off on it. We must imagine the T-1000 happy, our championship at marathon, so long as we can set the length of the race, is effectively untouchable. Other than marathons, are there any other events we might have a hope of winning? The answer is yes. In addition to our ability to sweat, endure, persist, persevere, and have a good time doing it, we have a unique ability to huck stuff with surprising accuracy and strength. If you've ever watched a baseball player deliver a fastball blindingly quick past the batter, or watched friends play darts at a pub, you've probably seen how humans can throw with remarkable speed, force, and precision. This skill helped us hunt, and probably paired well with persistence hunting, and probably wouldn't have been possible without evolutionary adaptations that are reflected in our anatomy. Throwing well also requires brain power. Calculating trajectories and predicting the location of things that are moving too fast to track is some serious math, especially when one has to account for things like wind speed, direction, and resistance, and the shape of the object thrown. So, some people think that adapting to throw well may have even helped to develop our big, beefy brains. Other creatures have been known to throw projectiles or to spit in their hunting, but none are quite so skilled at throwing as we are. Like running, we will even do it just for fun. Not just in sports like baseball, but serious sports like beer pong. So, when we compare ourselves to the animal kingdom, it turns out that we're not completely useless physically. And there are a few things that we are truly exceptional at, like throwing things and chasing things down. Special skills that helped us to prey on other animals and helped us to eat. But what should we eat? Returning to the rats, we come to what was called by author Michael Pollan the omnivore's dilemma. When everything is on the menu, how does one decide what to eat? For the rat, they rely, as we do, on their fundamental senses. Sweetness, indicating a high caloric food source, and tending to encourage further consumption of that food. Rats and humans share an inborn preference for things that taste sweet, while cats can't perceive sweetness and would likely rather eat the rat. Bitterness can indicate toxicity, and that's a major reason why hops and the bitterness that it brings to beer is an acquired taste. If you like drinking bitter beer, like me, you may congratulate yourself on your maturity. Babies and young people tend to, for good reason, stay away from bitter tastes like beer, which have to be learned to be enjoyed. A taste for these foods have to be acquired in order for them to be appreciated. We tend to stick with the safe sweet stuff that evolution assures us is well worth the risk, and usually need to be taught to eat bitter foods. Sour is interesting. When it is paired with sweet, it can be one of our favorite pairings, likely a taste developed from an evolutionary diet that was rich in sweet and sour fruits. Modern cola and soda pop tap into this ancient taste preference. They are high in both sugars and acids, replicating the tart and sweet balance that we have grown to love. Something like a man-made artificial fruit juice with caffeine added. But when sour is by itself, or when it dominates the palate, or when it is paired with funky flavors like those found in many fermented foods, it tends to indicate rot, decay, and toxicity, like bitterness. And so it tends to be disgusting to most people and rats, at least initially. Disgust has been described by author and psychologist Steven Pinker as intuitive microbiology. And if you look at the sort of things that are considered disgusting cross-culturally, things like vomit, feces, corpses, rotting foods, and the like, what we see are items that are all potential vectors for illness and disease. Sometimes our intuitive disgust can be overridden. Studies have shown that rats raised with exposure to bitter and sour flavors can acquire a tolerance to these innately adversive tastes. An individual rat may learn that a certain food source is okay to eat, but they cannot culturally transmit that information to future generations. But I can thank my Iron Age ancestors for letting me know about blue cheese. Again, unlike rats, we can learn to overcome our intuitive microbiology through our culture, and we can enjoy bitter, sour, and funky foods like blue cheese and beer, or funky sour beer. And this is a powerful tool, sometimes with unintended consequences. Here in North America, we have the cultural flavor of blue raspberry. Blue raspberries, of course, do not exist in nature. In fact, true blue is rather rare in nature. It seems very difficult to evolve as a pigment, to the extent that many blue things like blue jays and blue butterflies have achieved their coloration through a trick of physics, filtering and scattering the light so that only blue light is reflected. Something incredibly cool, and something that speaks to the fact that blue is rather rare in nature, and doubly so in our foods. We call them blueberries, but they're really pretty purple, especially when compared to our manufactured blue raspberries. A few years ago, young people in North America, raised on a diet of brightly colored candies and beverages, whose appearance was defined by artificial colors, began something called the Tide Pod Challenge. Here's an article where John S. Allen, a neuroanthropologist and author of the book, The Omnivorous Mind, Our Evolving Relationship with Food, explaining why some of us want to eat soap pods. Allen explains, humanity's omnivorous nature means that we occasionally override instincts that tell us a food is dangerous. Constantly searching for new foods to eat rather than sticking to set food sources has proven evolutionarily advantageous. We eat virtually anything, he says. If a potential food isn't edible, humans try to modify it with tools or fire. One example Allen gives is coffee. Bitterness, especially to children, smacks of toxicity. Yet young people, by learning from others, usually overcome their initial suspicion of coffee's acrid-seeming flavor. Tide Pods, however, are not modifiable into anything edible. You almost can't blame us for trying, though. Laundry pods look soft, sweet, and if you have been raised on a diet of vibrant blue processed sweets, then they also look delicious. We have also succeeded at many previous challenges before, like the Cycad challenge. Amami Oshima, a Japanese island that lies southwest of Japan's 4 major islands, is a place where the cycad, a plant which looks something like a small modern-day scale tree, has become a culturally important crop, despite being at least as toxic as Tide Pods. Through drying and fermentation, the trunks and seeds of the cycad are made safe to eat by the islanders. And they are not the only people who have discovered how to unlock cycad as a food source. The Yolngu, Aboriginal peoples of northern Australia, also eat its toxic seeds after cooking them in their own traditions in order to render them safe to eat. Cycad is not alone. Another example that you may have heard of is the Icelandic fermented shark meat dish, harkat. Harkat is made from Greenland sharks, whose flesh is poisonous to consume when fresh. The preparation, the fermentation, the processing of the meat makes it safe to eat, like the cooking of the cycad. And it's not just unusual foods like sleeper sharks or cycads that are toxic and only made possible to eat through cooking. Consider cassava, an important crop. After rice and corn, cassava is the third largest source of carbohydrates in several tropical countries. And I'm guessing there's a higher probability that you've tried bubble tea over hakao. The tapioca pearls are made from cassava. Yet cassava contains cyanide, enough that if eaten raw, can seriously harm us. But once properly cooked, it can become a major food source. It's said that some farmers actually prefer to grow more toxic varieties of cassava, as they are easier to grow, the toxicity protecting the plant from other creatures that may wish to consume the crop, keeping it safe from pests for us until we cook it and make it safe to eat. It's a little like the koala eating toxic eucalyptus leaves, but again, we are not reliant on our bodies to render this toxic food safe to eat. We've discovered how to do it externally using technology. Cooking. Rats are omnivores who have learned to fear some of the poisons that we've developed for them, but they altogether lack the human capability of cooking those poisons in order to transform deadly dishes into a wholesome meal. Wholesome, if perhaps still challenging. Culture, again, plays such an important role in deciding what we eat, and it's interesting that for many cultures, it is fermented foods that tend to be used as mealtime markers of in-group or out-group status. Unusual, special foods of specific cultural importance. If you've ever visited a friend of a different cultural background or visited another country, visited Iceland, and been told to try the hakao, while being told at the same time that you will not like it, then you're already familiar with how these fermented foods can help provide not just a source of nourishment, but also some sense of cultural identity, acting sometimes as a challenge to outsiders, such as surströmming, a Swedish fermented fish that is said by some to be even more challenging than hackut. These are perhaps the deep end of fermented foods, but there are lots of fermented foods that are acquired tastes with deep cultural significance. We are the people who eat kimchi. We are the people who drink beer. Blue cheese can be particularly challenging to many in Asian cultures. But natto can be equally off-putting to many Europeans or North Americans. The texture, the strong smell, the sliminess, all can be potentially off-putting. But I do love these foods, especially when paired with beer. And this is despite the fact that, as its critics have pointed out, blue cheese does smell like stinky feet. But as the French would say, le pied de Dieu, the feet of God. Cooking not only makes foods more digestible, and therefore more nutrient dense, more calorie rich, it can also enhance them through ennoblement, fermentation providing new nutritive benefits that were not present pre-fermentation, as well as active cultures that may carry its own significant health benefits. Cooking also makes foods that were previously unavailable to eat possible for us to eat. Whether these foods were too hard for us to chew or digest, or too toxic for us to tolerate, cooking unlocks their potential. But also, and critically, cooking can also help us to preserve food for use in the future. We're not exactly sure when this began, but we think it goes back a long way. There's some evidence that Neanderthals were intentionally fermenting meat, which would have surely been a challenging cultural dish. Culture is a major driver of what we eat, how we navigate the omnivore's dilemma, and how we limit and constrain our diets. In considering the variety and amount of things that we could eat as humans, it's really remarkable how little we tend to actually eat regularly. For creatures with the ability to eat a wide variety of foods, with the gift of an omnivore's appetite, and as heirs to a vast cultural inheritance, it's perhaps a little surprising that most of us have tended to subsist on just a few foods, and maybe almost exclusively one food, perhaps just one grain, at least after we became settled, dedicated agriculturalists. We are overpowered omnivores, but we dined like koalas, eating a monotonous diet. Even in modernity, today, when many of us have access to a staggering variety of foods that our early agricultural ancestors could only fantasize about, we don't eat as wide a variety of food as we could. Why is that? If I were to have to guess at what you eat regularly on a daily basis, the number one question I would ask is, where are you from? What is your cultural background? Where you live, how much money you have, and what you have access to eat is, of course, extremely important to what you will actually eat. But whether or not you choose to eat some of the things that you have access to or not, like fermented soybeans, or sushi, raw fish, has much to do with culture. These items are only occasional food items for me, but may represent a much more regular part of the diet for you. If so, for you, things like soy and fish, or cassava and corn would be considered a staple food, often simply called a staple, which is any food that is eaten in such a quantity and frequency that it comprises the major part of a conventional diet for a given people. Even though we could eat a lot of different things, most of us rely on just a handful of these staples to supply all of our daily food requirements. As Wikipedia puts it, for humans, a staple food of a specific society may be eaten as often as every day or every meal, and most people live on a diet based on just a small variety of food staples. Among them, cereals like rice, wheat, oats, or corn, legumes like lentils and beans, and tubers like potatoes or cassava account for about 90% of the world's food calorie intake. Early agricultural civilizations valued the crop foods that they established as staples because, in addition to providing necessary nutrition, they generally are suitable for storage over long periods of time without decay. Fresh, uncooked cereals can store exceptionally well if kept whole, dry, and free from pests, but they need to be cooked before they can be properly eaten and digested, or they can't become a staple. They must be ennobled through cooking processes like fermentation. Conversely, other foods are calorically and nutritionally dense when fresh, but cooking can be used to render them into a shelf-stable form. These transformations are both critical to understand if we want to understand the magic of cooking as a technology. Fish can be eaten raw and wriggling right from the water like Gollum, but you risk bacterial and parasitic infections. If you can cook, then the fish can not only be made more safe, but also elevated into something much more delicious, or something that can help keep you alive in the future. Fish can also be smoked, salted, and fermented. It can be stored for later. As we saw with surströmming, we still do this, and not just with fish, and not just out of necessity. In modernity, some preserved food technologies are employed simply because we have grown to like the flavors and textures that result from the process. Think smoked salmon or salted eggs. But we also still do this specifically to store foods for the longer term. One way to think of fermented cheese is as a dense, concentrated, more shelf-stable brick of fresh milk. Milk takes up a lot of volume, a lot of space, and goes bad quickly, but cheese is dense and can potentially be stored for years. In the late 70s, as an example, an effort to manipulate the American milk market to maintain an artificially stable and high price for milk through agricultural subsidies produced a milk surplus. This milk was converted into more stable forms like butter, powdered milk, and cheese, which resulted in the American Strategic Federal Food Reserve, now said to contain over 1 billion pounds of cheese. Not only is our cooked, fermented, processed foods like cheese much more shelf-stable, they are usually also more nutritionally dense, and also often easier to eat. Cooking utterly transformed our foods, and in so doing, cooking utterly transformed us. Oliver Goldsmith, an Irish author, wrote in the 18th century, "Of all the other animals, we spend the least time in eating. This is one of the great distinctions between us and the brute creation." He may be right. We throw well and can run a long time, but we also eat really, really quickly. How? As the New Scientist explains, although you probably enjoy a few meals every day, chances are that you spend very little time and muscular effort chewing your food. That kind of casual eating is very unusual. Our closest relatives, chimpanzees, spend almost half their day chewing, and with much greater force. When did eating become so easy? And what were the consequences? According to a new Harvard study, our ancestors between 2 and 3 million years ago started to spend far less time and effort chewing by adding meat to their diets and using stone tools to process food. Those changes would have saved early humans as many as 2.5 million chews per year and enabled further changes that helped make us human. To understand why, imagine eating the same diet as a chimpanzee. To gain enough calories to fuel your energy-guzzling brain, you would have to devote almost all of your daylight hours to searching for food. Chimps forage more or less continuously. Gorillas and orangutans eat for 9 hours a day. We'd probably have to eat for even longer. Our brains are more than twice as big, and our intestines are far too small to retain low-quality, raw food long enough to digest it properly. In fact, our guts are just 60% of the weight expected if we were a great ape of similar stature. Our small teeth and jaws tell a similar story. They are too small for the task of grinding down large quantities of tough, raw food. Compared with earlier hominins such as Homo habilis, modern humans, Neanderthals, and Homo erectus all have small teeth relative to their body size. To Wrangham, these morphological features are adaptations to cooking that arose about 1.9 million years ago. Richard Wrangham, is a primatologist, anthropologist, and the author of this excellent book, Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human. In it, he details how we made cooking, but then cooking made us, and how we can't go back. We have unlocked a hyper-niche food source, one only very rarely found in nature, outside of wildfires, which don't make the best chefs, one that we create. So it is almost exclusively our domain, and one that we are entirely dependent upon. In this way, we are a bit like the koala. We have a unique, singular type of food that we are now utterly reliant upon. No, it's not eucalyptus, which, if it goes, so too goes the koala. We have engineered for ourselves a uniquely human dietary trap: cooked food. We have painted ourselves into an evolutionary corner and are now physiologically incapable of returning to a truly raw food diet. Now, less adaptable and more dependent than the koala is on eucalyptus. They can at least eat other types of leaves. If all forms of cooked food were to disappear forever, overnight, we would not endure. And if we were to somehow adapt to such a crisis, it would surely result in a creature that is no longer a human as we know ourselves, likely sporting a koala-like skull, housing a smoothed and greatly reduced brain. With apologies for being pedantic to those on a raw food diet, no, you are not. You are cooking. You are processing and preparing your food. We might not always conceive of things like slicing, dicing, blending, juicing, milling, fermenting, or even the soaking of grains in water or the sprouting of grains as cooking technologies and techniques, but they most certainly are. And a raw food diet is not possible without them, without some cooking. Humans can eat truly raw foods just as we can eat eucalyptus, but we can no longer eat to survive without some form of cooking. Transforming inedible or marginal grass seeds into a nourishing gruel, bread, or beer is, to paraphrase Arthur C. Clarke, a technology sufficiently advanced to be indistinguishable from magic. To quote another English luminary, Friar Tuck, from the 1991 film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, this is grain,
which any fool can eat, but for which the Lord intended a more divine means of consumption. Let us give praise to our Maker
and glory to his bounty by learning about beer. In our next episode, episode 3, The Rise of Civilizations, Growing Grains, we'll learn more about beer by considering the question, what are the necessary prerequisites to regularly making and routinely enjoying beer? How did we achieve such a wonderful way of life? And what was the cost? Until then, cheers.